Good afternoon, everyone. Today, the next in our series of lectures on the development of currency, we're going to focus on how and why there was such growth in ancient trade and commerce, the arrival of a physical, portable means of payment. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what type of currency was first used and describe how it developed later in the form of coins. Now, going back thousands of years, you might imagine that precious stones were the first form of currency, but these were not found in sufficient numbers at that time. We do, though, have firm evidence of seashells being used as a primitive form of money. They were very much valued items at the time and were perfect for trade. They were taken in vast quantities along the great trade routes, and I'm sure you can imagine how significantly they enabled these civilizations to grow as a result. For now, let's move on to a time when we first find precious metals and minerals being used in the form of coins. Now, there's some debate as to when and where this happened, but it seems to have taken place at some point around the 7th century BC in and around Greece and the Middle East. In the past, archaeologists believed that the first coins were made from pure gold or artificial mixtures or alloys, but we can now be sure that they were actually produced from a substance known as electrum, an alloy that occurs naturally and is a blend of gold and silver. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away to the east, the Chinese appear to have had the same idea at the same time. While those in Greece and the Middle East were busy forging coins from electrum, their contemporaries in China had the same idea of creating coins to use as currency, but with a completely different manufacturing process. For years prior to this, the Chinese had used paper money made from white deerskin, but now they turned to casts and molds into which they poured liquid bronze and left it to set, eventually forming coins. If we were to look at examples of these coins, we would see that there was some variety in their shape. Some looked like little spades, but the vast majority resembled knife blades. There is intricate decoration on each surface, demonstrating magnificent workmanship. Moving forward from the 7th century and 400 years later, we meet Shi Huangdi, one of the first emperors of China. Sometime around the year 220 BC, he took these early forms of currency and simplified them into more basic coins of a circular shape with a distinctive square hole in the middle. Its design reflected a number of Chinese beliefs. For example, the round shape symbolized heavenly commandment, while the square symbolized the authority of the emperor. Some historians suggest that these types of coin had been invented hundreds of years before, and that Shi Huangdi's coins were derived from ring-shaped jade discs from the Zhou dynasty, which are believed to have been used as royal gifts for dignitaries. Whatever the case, we do know that Shi Huangdi decreed his new coins as the only legal currency in his empire, and perhaps this is the secret of their longevity. They survived for over 2,000 years. The coins themselves were fashioned of gold and bronze and weighed around 8 grams, though this varied as time went by. Sadly, one thing these coins did not retain was the elaborate design of earlier coins. Instead, Shi Huangdi's coin was more functional and could be made in a short space of time. In fact, it can be argued that in order to do this, Shi Huangdi created an early model of what eventually became mass production, though of course a cruder and less efficient version of what we see today, but an interesting thought nonetheless.
In your previous talks, you have looked at coins and then the rise of banknotes as the form of currency. Now, today I'd like to briefly cover the idea of banknote security. I thought that the 2017 introduction of a new £5 note in the UK would provide a great example of how banks are fighting against fake or counterfeit money. Now, you may already know that the newer note is not as large as the previous one, 15% less to be exact, and is made of a durable polymer, sometimes referred to as plastic, which will give the note a longer life and make the note harder to copy. On the left-hand part of the note, there are three security elements of particular interest: a small portrait of the Queen, the Elizabeth Tower with Big Ben, and lastly, a pound sign which changes from purple to green depending on the angle you look at it. All these are incorporated on a see-through window. In addition, the image of the Elizabeth Tower shows as gold-coloured on the front of the note, but on the back of the note it is silver. Directly below this is a kind of hologram. It's a silver patch which shows either the word 5 or the word pounds, depending on how you look at it. And above the Elizabeth Tower is a similar feature, but this one shows the coronation crown in 3 dimensions and produces a rainbow effect when viewed at certain angles. Interestingly, on the back of the note, this patch shows the word Blenheim. But the metal foil here, that's to say, the metal that forms the patch, is green. Last but not least is something you cannot see. Well, at least not under normal conditions. In the top middle section of the note, the number 5 will appear in the white triangular shape underneath the words Bank of England, but only when viewed under UV or ultraviolet light. Most banknotes these days have similar features, and Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back as we continue our lecture series on currency from ancient times to the modern day. For today's talk, we're going to discuss a need that emerged from an age-old negative side to human nature. When wealth is portable, particularly when it can be easily compressed into thousands of individual items of coinage, it inevitably becomes more attractive to a certain group of people. Even in ancient times, the wealthy, people of status, traders and so on, realised that to discourage thieves, their money would need to be either hidden or protected, and to do that they had a choice. They could either keep their riches safe by keeping them in temples, which were guarded 24 hours a day, or they could find a way to store their assets somewhere closer to home, where access was more convenient, and so the ancient Egyptians came up with a locking device. This was a mechanism similar to what is known today as a deadbolt that required the insertion of a key. The key operated a series of pins and allowed a long metal bolt to be withdrawn from its locking position, which in turn gave the owner access to their valuables. How long ago did this happen? We're a little vague on this, but definitely at some point later than 4000 BC. Since the Egyptians wanted their locks to be very strong, these locks suffered from one notable problem: their size. Some of the bigger examples we have found are over half a metre long and weigh around 30 kilos. The Romans later adapted these Egyptian locks to make them more functional and available for use in regular homes. They took the Egyptians' designs, made them smaller, and added their own inspired invention, one that enabled them to create a more sophisticated locking system: steel springs. One negative side effect they did suffer from was that by using a spring instead of a bolt, it was relatively easy for a particularly dedicated and powerful thief to damage or remove the lock using brute force. However, the Roman locking mechanisms made it difficult to actually force the lock open thanks to their precise construction. For their time, it's hard not to be impressed by such technology. The examples we have talked about so far are key-based locks, but next I'd like to look at a variation on this, the combination lock. The combination lock is the basis of many modern safes. As we will see, the combination lock shares many features of those used by the Egyptians and Romans. For the purposes of this explanation, I'll begin by looking at a combination padlock, which is easy to grasp. One of the most important aspects of any locking system is protecting the lock itself. In the case of the padlock, there's a secure outer casing to protect the delicate lock mechanism inside. This casing is usually constructed from a hard metal such as brass. Having this strong outer casing prevents a potential thief from simply breaking the padlock with a tool such as a hammer. The main movable part of the lock, the part which opens and closes, is a strong bar often made of reinforced or galvanized steel. As you can see, the bar is curved, almost U-shaped, but much longer on one side. At the end of this longer side is a metal spring, which is pushed down when the padlock is locked. So how is a combination lock unlocked? The metal bar has 4 pins on it, which prevent it from being opened. However, each of the pins can be released by moving a combination dial. These are circular and numbered from 0 to 9. Move all the dials into the correct position and the spring is released, forcing the lock to open. Now, that is a very simple combination lock. The lock of a safe, on the other hand,